You mean with the strength?
With the clip. Academics.
So do you want me looking at the camera most of the time when I'm talking, or looking at you, or both?
Look at me in the camera. Okay. And alternate.
All right.
Okay, they're hearing everything we're saying. You or both? Me in the camera. Yep. Okay.
The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Yaron Brook Show, special edition. We're doing this from beautiful Clemson University campus. I'm here with Dr. Bradley Thompson, Brad as I will call him, and I haven't been here, God, and I guess since before COVID.
Yeah, it's probably 5 years at least.
Yeah, so campus is completely different. I don't recognize it. There are new buildings everywhere. We're sitting in the new business school, which is completely, new, and I'd never seen it. I have to say that the Institute for Capitalism, which is housed here, has got this beautiful, I remember when it was like a dinky little office in a big business school, economics department, or whatever. Now it's got this whole beautiful set of offices, suite of offices, a bunch of staff. It really, really is cool to see how much progress has been made just in the last few years since I was here last.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've had serious growth in the last few years, and Clemson continues to prove to be a remarkably welcoming and supportive place. When few other universities in America would have something like what we do, an Institute for the Study of Capitalism, and also let me just say, welcome back.
It's great to be back.
Great to have you back in Clemson, and where the handshake is a little stronger.
So tell us a little bit about the growth. You recently got a $25 million commitment over several years to grow the Capitalism Institute. But tell us what it used to do, what it's doing now, what this money is going to be used to for the future.
Yeah. So the Clemson, now the Snow Institute for the Study of Capitalism, was founded in 2005 with a startup grant from BB&T and John Allison. And in the early years, we were very small. In the first year, I was the Clemson Institute, and wherever I was standing on campus, that's where the Clemson Institute was. And then I'm sure many of your audience members know or have heard of Eric Daniels. Eric was my first hire. And then over the course of the next 5 or 6 years, we grew very, very slowly, hired an administrator in the early years, and then started slowly hiring faculty through postdocs that we had. And in those early years, we did what most similar kinds of institutes do. We had a lecture series, probably the best lecture series on campus. We ran summer conferences that we co-sponsored with ARI, a conference for undergraduates from around the world on Atlas Shrugged and the moral foundations of capitalism. But then in 2014, we launched our premier academic program, the Lyceum Scholars Program. And we can talk about that, I'm sure we will, a little bit later in the conversation. And that changed everything for us, and we have really grown significantly since then. But this $25 million gift that we received from David and Lynette Snow obviously has changed everything. And what it has done, most importantly, is that 20 million of the 25 will go into an endowment, which means now that the Snow Institute is forever. And that's a great thing, as long as we can stay true to our mission, right? And of course, the story of most institutes, universities, right, is slow corruption over time. And my primary goal in running the Institute is to preserve the mission and the integrity of the Institute for as long as I'm here and for many decades after, I eventually leave. And then with the remaining $5 million, we will use that money to expand our programs. One of the funny things about getting this kind of gift is, I receive phone calls and emails and
Everybody
texts.
wants your money.
Everybody wants my money. And secondly, they don't think I need any more money, right?
Yeah.
They think with $25 million, as they put it, you're set. Well, the fact of the matter is, the $5 million that we actually get to spend above and beyond the endowment is really just for an expansion of our current programming. So in many ways, it doesn't change anything in terms of the fundraising that I have to do for the Institute. We still have to pay salaries. We still have to run our programs and all of that.
And I assume you're still ambitious and want to even go bigger.
Well, that's the plan. So our plan is to double and triple in the next 5 or 6 years all of everything that we're doing, particularly the Lyceum program.
So if we set aside the Lyceum program for a minute, what does the Institute, what does the Snow Institute actually do?
So our mission, in a phrase, is to explore the moral foundations of capitalism. So as you know, there are lots of free market think tanks, both on university campuses and state policy think tanks, all of which are great for the most part, all of which I support. The difference, though, between all of these free market think tanks and what we do is the emphasis on the moral foundations of capitalism. So all of these other think tanks are run by economists for economists. They all do public policy work in the area of economics. We don't do any of that. So I'm not an economist. Nobody that I've hired is an economist. In fact, we'll never hire an economist. We focus on the moral, the historical, the constitutional foundations, not just of capitalism. In many ways, you could say a better name for the Institute would now be the Snow Institute for the Study of a Free Society. We're interested in promoting a free society in its various aspects, but most importantly, morally, right? So we want to be able to defend laissez-faire capitalism, morally speaking, because as you know, that's where it needs the greatest defense. The fact of the matter is, in any battle of ideas between economics and morality, over the long term, morality always wins out, which is precisely why the defenders, conservative and libertarian defenders of capitalism continue to lose, right? Because they just want to defend it on economic grounds. The problem with that, however, is that even Karl Marx understood that capitalism is the most productive and efficient economic system ever devised by man. He wrote that exactly in the Communist Manifesto, right? And the problem is that capitalism, with the exception obviously of Ayn Rand, has never had a proper moral defense. So, and absolutely that is true in the context of American higher education. So that's our mission. And, we, as I said, we do conferences, we do lecture series to promote that. And going forward, one of the things that we plan to do in the next couple of years is to launch what we call the Atlas Shrugged project. So our goal is to make Atlas Shrugged great again, at least culturally, by which I mean, we want hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Americans, particularly young Americans, reading Atlas. So that is something, that's a new program that we're going to be launching in the next couple of years.
So what would be the way in which you'd achieve something like that?
Yeah, so, first, as with everything we do here at Clemson, we start locally. That is to say, working Atlas Shrugged into courses here at Clemson University, running reading groups here at Clemson, but we want to expand out. And this will be more of a community-oriented program. So the idea is to find ways, probably I'm sure via online courses, that focus primarily, if not exclusively, on Atlas Shrugged. And what I'd like to see is I'd like to see the rebirth of the old Ayn Rand campus clubs. And I mean, that was one of my earliest and first introductions to the Objectivist movement. I remember this would have to go back to the early 80s, I think, and I remember being at Boston. I was attending a lecture at Boston.
Make this change.
Whoops.
I think it's, there we go. Okay.
Attending a lecture at Boston University by
yeah.
Peter Schwartz.
Oh, wow.
And
I'm going to see Peter this weekend.
yeah, and those were pretty heady days.
Yeah.
And so I want to try to sort of revive
That would be amazing. That would be amazing.
Atlas Shrugged in the culture generally, but more particularly with college students. And so, we're going to think of ways to make that happen. And I also want to start running some summer conferences. I want to bring back our Atlas Shrugged and the Moral Foundation of Capitalism conferences. My real dream, though, is I would like to start running summer conferences on Atlas in Telluride, Colorado, which I know you've been there for.
It's beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful places on the planet.
It is, and I actually think that it is a better representation of Galt's Gulch than Ouray, Colorado,
Yes,
which is said to be the place that Ayn Rand.
It is the place that inspired her, but Telluride is more dramatic. The cliffs on both sides are much taller and much more. The valley is much more dramatically set. It is. So you talk about the moral foundations of capitalism. To what extent is Ayn Rand objectivism a part of of that mission, if you will?
Yeah, no, it's at the heart of the mission because where else would you go, right?
Well, Adam Smith would claim he has a moral defense of capitalism, right?
He would sort of claim that he does, but it's self-evidently not sufficient. And not only is it not sufficient, it's wrong on many levels. And he completely concedes to altruism as a first premise, right? His defense of capitalism, morally speaking, is because we can help a lot of people. And it's true that capitalism delivers the goods and raises the boat for everybody, but is not and should not be the primary moral defense. The primary moral defense of capitalism is that it's grounded in human nature and in the greatest possibilities of human nature, that's what we have to liberate, and if in a sense rediscover is that Ayn Rand talked about the virtue of selfishness, and we should be talking about the moral virtues of capitalism. And so, we're going to make Atlas great again.
Atlas is always great again. Is always great. Atlas,
on its own terms, yes, but in the culture.
Atlas great again in the culture. That's a long one. So the big program, or the program I think you spend the most time on within the institute is the Lyceum program, where you interact directly with students. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and how that's changed over the years?
Yeah. So we started the Lyceum Scholars Program in 2014. It was kind of a wild idea I had. The original idea was actually much bigger and more ambitious, but in order to get up and running, we chose a much more modest plan, which it turns out I think was a much better idea to begin with. So the first thing to say about the Lyceum Scholars Program is that it's a scholarship program. Up until this year, we have given 10 scholarships per year to incoming freshmen, renewable over 4 years, which means high school students, high school seniors apply for it. And we use a great books approach to studying the history of liberty, capitalism, the American founding, and the principles of moral character. And in exchange for the scholarship, the students take our 8-course curriculum. So freshman year, they take a course called Wisdom of the Ancients, of course, in ancient Greek and Roman moral thought. I'll just give you one course of each year. Second year, they do a course on the political theory of capitalism, in which we do use Atlas Shrugged. In their junior year, they do a course on the political thought of the American founding. And then in the senior year, they do a course called Wisdom of the Moderns, which is modern moral thought. Essentially, generally speaking, the books change every year, but Shakespeare to Ayn Rand. And the course as it's currently being taught includes The Fountainhead.
Excellent.
So it's a kind of great books curriculum, but not simply a great books curriculum. It has these particular emphases. So our position, unlike many other great books programs, is that we're not simply about the pursuit or the quest for truth, right? Because a lot of these programs, they pursue, but they never get there, right?
And they don't want to suggest maybe that they can get there.
Precisely, right? That there actually is a truth, because to suggest that there is truth would be, from their perspective, a kind of dogmatism, right? And our position is that there is truth, that the truth is something, that the truth about things can be understood, and that, most university logos, most university mottos include truth. Right? But how many universities?
That's from an ancient tradition, right? Nobody would do that today in a university logo.
Precisely. And the other one of the other virtues or values they talk about is virtue itself.
Yes.
Right. So the Harvard motto, and virtually all the Ivy League mottos take very seriously, when they were founded, the ideas of truth and virtue. But of course they don't anymore, not even close, because from their perspective we live in a post-truth society. And so in addition to making Atlas great again, we're going to make the truth great again, and virtue, and that's really kind of at the heart. So we take very seriously, in addition to this kind of modified great books program, we take very seriously the question of moral character. Moral character and the development of moral character within our students is something we take seriously, very seriously, and I don't think any other college or university, with the exception possibly of Christian colleges, right, takes that seriously. But I think we actually take it even more seriously through our Socratic tutor program. So this Socratic tutor program that we run there is no other academic program in the United States or really around the world quite like it. So what we do is we assign to each one of our Lyceum scholars what we call a Socratic tutor. Socratic tutor is a faculty member connected to the program, and the Socratic tutor will meet with his or her tutees every other week, and each tutor will have 6 or 7 tutees.
And they meet them one-on-one?
And they meet one-on-one, right? So this is not a group meeting. They meet one-on-one for about an hour, right? So that means over the course of the semester, each student will meet with their tutor about 8 times. And the purpose of which is twofold. First, to help these young men and women translate theory into practice. So for instance, if they are in our freshman course, Wisdom of the Ancients, this course in ancient Greek and Roman moral thought, and one of the books they read is Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Well, I can tell you, as somebody who is much older than an 18-year-old, reading it for the 20th time is still a challenge. It's a very, very difficult book. And the question is, how does your typical 18-year-old 21st century American translate Aristotle's ideas into their lives here, now, today? So that's the first concern, right? We take that seriously because we don't think reading great books is simply about philosophizing.
Abstract knowledge for the sake of abstract knowledge.
Precisely, right?
This is for living.
Yeah, it is for living. That's precisely right. But that's the hard part. That's where the rubber hits the pavement. So, and the question is, how do you do that, right? We don't want our young people just philosophizing about ideas. and then on Friday and Saturday night doing lots of things that maybe they ought not to be doing,
Yep.
right? In the end, we want them to lead lives of nobility and honor, and that goes to the second purpose of the Socratic Tutor program, which is we take the question of moral character very seriously, and we want our students to think seriously about moral character, and their own moral character in particular. And the fact of the matter is, most young people, ages 18 to their early 20s, they don't really think seriously or deeply about the question of moral character and their moral character in particular. And so through these conversations, we get them to do that. Now, let me make it clear, however, the purpose of this is not by the end of their 4 years to create, generate, promote a kind of ideal student or citizen or person of moral character. All right? We're not that vain that we think that we can do that or even should do that. What we're really trying to do is plant seeds. Right? So my goal is not to transform some young person's life over the course of 4 years. My goal, my hope is that maybe 10 years down the road, when they're married and maybe are starting to have kids and have a job, and they face the first crisis, the first real major crisis of life, and they're struggling, and maybe one of these students will think back to those sessions that he had with one of our Socratic tutors and think, yeah, I remember that conversation with Professor X, and he or she said something that actually applies to this crisis that I'm dealing with in life right now, right? So we're really just planting seeds with the hope that they'll bloom later in life.
So a lot of people out there in the culture, because of religion, I think, view moral character as a list of negatives. Don't party too hard, don't do this, don't do that, and commandments, and focus primarily on the negative, on what not to do. Rand's, of course, view of ethics is very different than that, and agents have a different perspective on. So how do your Socratic tutors approach this question of what does it mean to have moral character? Because obviously there's not agreement about what it even means.
Yeah, and I can tell you that not all of my faculty agree on all of these issues, right? So we come to these questions sometimes with somewhat, relatively speaking, different perspectives, but the focus really is on trying to get the most out of these young people, right? So we live in a time and age where many young people have a deficit of meaning in their lives, right? And there's this famous book written in the 40s or 50s, The Search for Meaning.
Yep.
And I think Gen Z today, as much as any generation that I've ever known in my adult lifetime, is searching for meaning, right? And so one of the questions that I'll ask, one of the first questions that I might ask of a student one of my own tutees is, so Yaron, who is the best version of yourself in 10 years, right? And of course, they've never really thought about that question.
Particularly not when you're young.
Yeah, and the first go-to answer is, well, I want to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll be married. Maybe I'll have kids. And I'll say, no. Those are all fine things, right? But that's not what I mean. What's the best version of yourself morally? Who is the person that you want to become? So one day, yes, you may be a husband or a wife, you may be a mother or a father, you may be a ballet instructor, you may be a soccer coach, you're certainly going to be a colleague, and in all of those relationships, you will have moral relationships with all of these people in your life. And what is the best version of yourself that will help other people to become better themselves? But in the end, the real question, it's not about so much first your relationship with other people.
Yep.
It's always about your relationship with yourself.
Yep.
Right? That's That's what is most important. And in my experience, this is the one thing that I find most young people, in fact, not even young people, I think most people that I've experienced in my life, they don't have a proper relationship with themselves, right? They don't introspect deeply enough into who they are, what their virtues and vices are, and what that best version of themselves is and or could be, right? And so, and of course what that means is, this is fundamentally a question about truth, right? Discovering the truth about oneself, discovering the truth about one's values, discovering the truth about one's own choices in life, right? And you know, one of the things I talk about with my students in our Socratic tutor sessions actually is the question of truth. So, Yaron, you know,
What is truth?
young Yaron, an 18-year-old Yaron, comes into my office, sits down, and literally the first words out of my mouth will be, "So, Yaron, what is truth?"
And it's a question that almost nobody can answer today. I mean, there was this amazing exchange between Lex Friedman and oh God, what's his name? The guy who runs OpenAI, Sam Altman, the guy who runs OpenAI. So here's the guy responsible for training AI, right? And Lex asks him, "What is truth?"
Yeah.
And he basically says, "There's no such thing." And you know, nothing, right? He says maybe math is truth, maybe math, right?
Right.
But that, so rationalistically, so some creation
Right.
above here is truth. And I think about the fact that we live in a culture in which all our information is going to be filtered through AI soon. AI trained by people who don't believe there is such a thing as truth.
Right.
It's a scary proposition. This is one of the most important questions you can ask anybody.
It is, right? And no student has ever given me a satisfactory answer, and I wouldn't expect.
No,
you know,
not as the first, not at the beginning.
yeah.
Maybe after 4 years with you.
maybe after 4 years,
Yeah.
but you know,
You should ask the same question at the end.
and we do. We do ask the same questions in the end, but you know, so they give me incomplete answers to the question, and then I tell them, all right, you know, I think that's inadequate. So let's. And they usually want to give me kind of a dictionary definition, or another question that I often ask is, you know, what is friendship?
Yeah.
And the first thing they do is they give me Aristotle's definition of friendship from books 9 and 10 of the Nicomachean
Because they've
Ethics.
just read it?
Mostly because they've just read it.
Oh, yeah?
And I say, no. I tell them, I've read Aristotle. I know his views on friendship. Just tell me, you know, what does friendship mean to you in your life? And then what we do is, you know, and I'll say, so, you know, Yaron, do you have any friends?
Yeah.
And of course, Yaron will say, oh, I have about 50 friends.
I don't have many friends at all, but okay.
Yeah. So, but the real, most often they say 10, right?
Yeah.
So 10's a good number to work with. Oh, okay. So you've got 10 friends. Well, what is the difference between number 1 and number 10?
Sure.
Right? And so we talk about that, and all of a sudden, and by asking a lot of other questions. So, you know, I may ask a young man, do you have any female friends? What does it mean, and are female friends different from your male friends?
Yeah.
Right? And what do you consider yourself to be friends with your parents, which most young people do?
Oh.
And all of a sudden, so we start attacking the question of what friendship is from a number of perspectives, but none of which are based on books.
Yeah.
It's all based on one's firsthand experience, your observation, right? So when you look, you have friends yourself. Tell me about your friendships, your own personal friendships. What about the friendships that you observe? What about your parents' friendships?
Yep.
Et cetera, et cetera. And so we attack the question from a variety of perspectives, then trying to induce certain characteristics that really get to the heart of what friendship is. But now I want to go back to truth, because you know, one of the things that you say about friendship, right? Friendship is a relationship. That's where you start.
Yep.
Friendship is a relationship. Well, guess what? So is truth. Truth is a relationship. Truth is a relationship between an idea or a proposition and objective reality.
Yep.
Right? So, which is very difficult for my students to understand. Because most of my students think, for instance, that if there were no human beings on planet Earth,
It'd still be truth.
truth would still exist.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
And truth somehow gets implanted in you. I think most of them have an intrinsic,
That's right.
religious-based
Correct.
conception of truth.
Yeah.
Truth is revealed.
Yeah, exactly. So we start to think about truth as a relationship, right, between an idea, proposition, and objective reality. But it's still too abstract for them.
Yep.
They have a very difficult time understanding it. So I give them example, what I think is actually the best example to talk about truth, and that is a courtroom, in a jury trial.
Yeah.
Right? What's involved in a jury trial? Well, we know this. Something happened.
Should show them 12 Angry Men.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Something happened. Somebody was murdered.
Yeah.
All right? And we're not certain who did it. The prosecution thinks it knows who did it. The defense is defending a person who says they did not do it. So what's at stake? What's at stake is the truth about what happened. The prosecution presents its evidence demonstrating that the defendant committed the crime. The defense presents its evidence demonstrating that the defendant could not have done it. And the jury, and by the way, every witness who comes on the stage, right, has to put their hand on a Bible and say, and they're asked, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, right? So it's about truth. It's about identifying what actually happened, right? Which is a relationship, right? Now, but what is the most difficult, when it comes to the question of truth, what is the single most difficult relationship? It's what I said earlier. It's one's relationship to oneself.
Yeah.
The most difficult area in life in which to be truthful, right, is not with your parents or your friends, your colleagues. It's with yourself.
And the most important one, not just the most difficult one, the most important one.
And absolutely the most important one, right? So this is a very long-winded way of just giving you an example of what we do.
The kind of conversations.
Yeah. But ultimately, it always comes back to helping these young men and women think seriously and deeply, probably for the first time in their lives, about their moral character and the core, the core pillars of their moral character. The single most important of which is their own relationship with their self and their own selves, and whether they can be truthful about who and what they are.
Yep.
And once you have, once you gain that insight into who and what you are, right, then you can start to think seriously and deeply about who is the best person that you envision in 10 years.
Yep. So what is your vision for where this program is heading? What is your ambitious goals for the Lyceum program?
Yeah, so thankfully, with this gift from the Snow family, this year we will be doubling the number of scholars we take into the program. So we'll be going from 10 to 20. And then we hope to go from 20 to 30 within 5 or 6 years. And then eventually to quadruple the number. Now, let me also mention, I haven't mentioned this yet, because of the success, and let me take a minute to talk about the success of this program. Because of the success of it, just here on the campus at Clemson University, I had regular Clemson students knocking down the doors wanting to be a part of the program. And I had to tell them, I'm sorry, but you had to apply as a high school senior. You know, you can't get in midstream. So we created a parallel track program that we call the Lyceum Fellows Program. For regular Clemson students, the requirements are exactly the same, except they only have to take 6 of the 8 required courses. And they also have more flexibility in taking those courses. And we now have over 150 Lyceum Fellows. So right now, we've actually got just north of 200 students in the Lyceum program. And within the next few years, we want to double and triple those numbers. We want 500-600 students in the Lyceum program. Let me also share with you and your audience, I think, some extraordinary statistics. When we first launched this program in 2014, I only had 2 staff members working for me at the time. We had a $5,000 marketing budget, and we literally did not know what we were doing in terms of marketing to high school students.
Sure.
I was expecting 30 to 50 applications for a program that nobody in America knew anything about that first year.
Yep.
We had 190 applications. This year, for the current freshman class, we had over 1,000
Wow.
applications from high school students around the United States. So, I mean, you know, build it and they will come, and we have built it.
Build it right.
And yeah, we have built it and they are coming, which has been extraordinary. We have just enormous potential for growth. I mean, and what this tells us, of course, is that there is a yearning, burning desire of ordinary Americans, high school students and their parents, for this kind of an education.
Yeah.
So we're going to be expanding, all right? So there's internally here at Clemson. The other remarkable thing is that there are, over the course of the last few years, at least 10 other universities have contacted me because they want to try to replicate what we're doing here at Clemson with the Lyceum program. And just in the last month, I've had conversations with several people around, faculty members around the country who want to do this. So it's an idea, I think, whose time has come. And our goal is we want to export this, right? We're not going to keep this here just at Clemson. That's not how you change the world.
So you bring up change the world. So put this into the perspective of your view on how the world gets changed. How do we change the world?
Yeah, well, I mean, I hate to be trite.
Be trite.
Okay, yeah.
Truth sometimes is trite.
Yeah. Ideas have consequences, right? That is a truism that has sort of guided my life from the time I was a freshman in college, and
They have consequences on us as individuals, and they have consequences
for the culture in general.
They shape the culture.
And you know, another metaphor to use, right, is that economics is downstream from politics, politics is downstream from culture, culture is downstream from the universities.
Ideas, yeah.
Right, and the ideas are in the universities. So I have always believed that if you really want to change the culture in any meaningful and permanent way, it has to be through the generation of ideas, the culture of ideas. And at the heart of the culture of ideas in the United States, right, are the colleges and universities. So generally speaking, that's how we do it. And you know, and we also live at a very interesting time in history. America's universities are collapsing. They're collapsing for a number of different reasons. They're collapsing demographically, right? There just aren't enough students. I heard recently that I think a college is closing every other week in the United States. And that trend is only going to continue and actually deepen. And of course, they're being destroyed internally, ideologically. And you know, of course, we've seen this in particular in the last 18 or 20 months post October 7th. And the fact of the matter is, there is a major shift going on in this country. Parents do not want to spend $100,000, $200,000 to have their son or daughter indoctrinated in bad and evil ideas, and so they're looking for alternatives. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've been so successful, is because we provide an alternative to what's going on at Harvard. And by the way, I mean, you know, since October 7th, there has been a major turn away from the Ivy League. I've been promoting this hard on my various social media sites.
Have you seen an increase in applications at the Institute?
Oh,
at the Lyceum program?
yeah. Well, we're now.
Yeah, I mean the growth has been massive anyway. But have you seen an added increase
yeah,
since October 7th?
Not since October 7th, but that's for internal reasons.
Okay.
Because, to be honest, I mean, we have the most serious application of any college or university in the United States. Our students, high school students, they have to write 3 essays.
Oh wow.
And they're not, why do you want to go to college,
Yeah.
or why should you dig wells in Guatemala?
Yeah.
Right. These are serious questions.
Yeah.
One of the questions that we ask on the application is 3 words: why be moral?
Okay.
Right. Not your typical
Yep.
college
No.
application essay. And so we've actually sort of tried to limit the number of so we have 3 essays on the application, and we had 1,000 applications.
That's amazing.
That's 3,000 essays that my staff of 8 people have to read in 1 month.
Okay.
Right. So anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
You
we
got it.
would otherwise see, yes, a huge spike.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I want to make sure your audience hears directly from the horse's mouth: the Ivy League is dead.
Okay.
The Ivy League is a clown show, and now everybody knows it. And there has been, and this is what I've been promoting on social media, the new Ivy League is south of the Mason-Dixon. And there have been a number of newspaper articles promoting Southern universities, and Clemson in particular. Clemson is the new Harvard. That's my line, and I'm sticking with it.
All right, you heard it here first. So one way to change the culture is by teaching young people and getting them engaged with these ideas and changing minds and impacting their ability to think. Another is through advocating for ideas, writing books, articles. So tell us a little bit about what you'll be doing in terms of books, articles, essays, things like that.
Yeah. So some of your audience, at least, might know of my 2019 book, which I happen to have a copy of, America's Revolutionary Mind,
Yep.
A Moral History of the American Revolution and the Declaration that defined it. I think this is my best book, and so for those of you who you're on Super Chat, you might go to Amazon, get yourself a copy, and then most recently, just a month ago, I published this 520-page book, The Political Thought of the American Revolution, a reader. It's volume 1.
Okay.
Volume 2 will be coming out in a week or 2.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it's what we call a reader.
So whose essays are in here?
Yeah. So it's the essays of all of the major American revolutionaries.
Okay.
So James Otis, Daniel Delaney, Richard Bland, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander
Okay.
Hamilton, et cetera, and many, many more.
How many volumes do you plan on?
Yeah. So there'll be 2 volumes on the American Revolution. Then I will do a separate volume on what I call the American founding, as distinct from the Revolution.
Okay.
And then I'm also going to do a volume on loyalist political thought, those people during the Revolution, right, who were
Yep,
loyal
yep.
to the British Crown. And then 2 more things. And many of your audience members actually have been politely harassing me now for a couple of years, wondering where the next volume, right? So going back to America's Revolutionary Mind,
Yep.
I promised in the preface to the book that there would be a second volume titled America's Constitutional Mind.
I remember.
I'm sorry to report that book has actually been on the back burner for the last 5 years. And it's been on the back burner because, as I think you know, I started a Substack
Yep.
called The Redneck Intellectual. And, I've been putting out 5,000 word essays every other week or so. And that's just taken up a huge amount of time and drawn me into, sort of never-ending controversies. which I enjoy. I've been doing a lot of writing on my Substack. And for your audience, I think they might be interested in this. I've got a new series that'll be coming out. It's actually been written for about 7 months, but it'll be coming out sometime in the next month or two on self-interest.
Okay.
On the sort of the history of self-interest in moral philosophy, with a particular emphasis. One of the essays is on the Christian view of self-interest, which I think your audience will find of interest. So anyway, last thing I'll say, and then I'll end on this, and that is I am back to writing America's Constitutional Mind.
Okay.
It is 2/3 to 3/4 finished. I've got 2 or 3 more chapters,
Okay.
which I'll have done within the year, and so it'll be out sometime in 2026.
All right, that's fantastic. I mean, you are also going to work on a project. I hate to bring this up because you're also going to work on something about the French Revolution.
You're recalling a conversation we had about 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, because the contrast, of course, in
Yeah.
the too many people out there in the intellectual world, view these two revolutions as the same, right?
Right. And
As
they're not.
emanating from the same
Yeah.
ideas, and they're not, of course.
Yeah. So if I live long enough, I will write a book comparing and contrasting the American and French revolutions. I've got parts of it written, and I do actually. Your audience is either not going to believe me or just think I'm insane, but I do have another book.
Do both.
Yeah, could be both. I've got another book half written titled Political Philosophy in the Age of Revolution, which will be case studies of the great thinkers, philosophers of revolution, namely Locke, Montesquieu, Rousseau, Burke, Paine, and Tocqueville.
Cool. So, there are probably some listeners out there, young, ambitious, maybe thinking about a career in academia or careers as intellectuals, who might be feeling like everything's already been written. This is, there's nothing that interesting to do. Fix that, because that's BS.
Yeah, well, it's understandable. I entirely understand.
Particularly when you're young,
Yeah.
you don't really know.
Right. Well, and you're just overwhelmed
Yeah.
by how much has been written,
Yeah.
right? And it's hard to think that anything more could be said. For instance, about the American Revolution,
Yeah.
or the Civil War, for instance. And it's an understandable view, but it's wrong. The fact of the matter is, I have come to the view actually that we know very little about the American Revolution. I mean, we know all about all the superficial events. We know about all the battles, but America's revolutionary mind. There's no other book, if you don't mind me saying, like it on the American Revolution, and I was inspired to write it when I read a quotation from John Adams, which I'd read many times before, was very familiar with, where Adams says, he asks himself rhetorically the question, what was the American Revolution? Followed by a second question, the war, question mark. And he said, no, the American Revolution was not the war. The American Revolution took place in the minds of the American people in the 15 years before shots were fired at Lexington. When I read that, it wasn't until the 30th time that I'd read it that Shazam, like all the lights went on, and I realized that despite the fact that there are hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of books written on the American Revolution, we don't know the causes, the nature, and the meaning of the American Revolution, because there's never been a book that attempts to understand the moral revolution that took place, right, in the minds and actions of the American people. And that quotation changed everything, and it changed the way I approached the study, the reading, and then eventually in the form of the book, the writing and I think that is true of virtually everything. So for your audience members, maybe who follow me on Substack, last year I did a series of essays on the frontier, the role of the frontier in American history. And I think, I came to realize that if I had another life to live, that there are no end of books that one could write.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about the dearth of books about the 19th century and how much we don't know about the 19th century. I mean, this is a century of capitalism, it's a century of industry, it's a century of the frontier. It's a century where America goes from a relatively poor country to the richest country in the world. I mean, so much happened during this century. And we know we have very few good history books. And part of it is this idea that ideas shape history, approaches to morality shape history. Ayn Rand's, there are a few thinkers who've thought about this in one way or another. Ayn Rand really, that's her theory of history. But so many books about so many periods of history need to be written still from that perspective.
Absolutely, no question about it. And every subject, every historical subject that you think has been exhausted, I would argue that we barely know anything about it. And that's certainly the attitude that you have to have if you're particularly if you're a historian. History in many ways is history is really a kind of philosophy,
Well, it's the concretes that allow you to come to philosophical conclusions to a large extent.
Well, it's a kind of
know what you need to have the empirical data, and history provides you with the empirical data.
History is teaching philosophy by examples, right? And so, I described in the book what I developed as a new approach to the study of history that I call the moral history, and I do think that adopting this methodology, this historical methodology, I think opens up all kinds of new scenes and venues for the reinterpretation of the past. So, yeah, I would say don't listen to anybody who tells you that the subject has been exhausted.
Absolutely.
I think we've barely scratched the surface.
Yep. All right, so we've got a few questions, and we can see. I'm here at Clemson because I'm giving a talk in a little while. It's not an hour and a half, I think, on the war in the Middle East to the Lyceum scholars, which will be fun because it'll be a small group, but it'll be I think engaging, and we have an opportunity for lots of Q&A. Anything? I mean, you've told us about the new books. Anything we've missed in terms of anything exciting going on right now that you want to say before we go to the questions?
I think we've covered a fair amount. People should contact us if they want to learn more about the Lyceum program.
So where do they find information about it?
Yeah, they just go online, Google
Clemson Lyceum.
Yeah, Clemson Lyceum, Clemson Capitalism, Snow Institute for the Study of Capitalism, and there's a lot there. And I'm always having people who come through the area and want to come and visit, and I'm always happy to host and entertain people who.
And we have kids who are Lyceum scholars, who are three of them of the class right now, children of parents who I think listen to the show, were involved in with the Ayn Rand Institute in one way or the other. So it's becoming a real alternative for people searching for something outside of the conventional education that's out there. Education in quotation marks.
Yeah.
That's out there. All right, Wes asks, is the list of books that are part of the program publicly available?
Yeah, it should be on the website, and I think we have course syllabi on our website, on the Lyceum website. So if you just go to the Snow Institute's website and then go to the Lyceum program, and I think if you just search around, to be perfectly honest, like I haven't gone to our website in probably 2 years, so I don't really, I can't, I'm not entirely positive about what I'm saying, but yeah, and if that's not adequate, we send out our course syllabi for people who ask, so happy to do that.
Good. All right, so you can send a message probably on the website if you don't find what you're looking for. Send a message and they'll get back to you. All right, I know we said we wouldn't talk about politics, and I have no interest, but you're going to get asked. Ian wants to know what you think. Do you think the president has the proper power of impoundment? Do you know what that means?
I have no idea what that
Okay, so what that means is it's the big crisis now in D.C., which is if Congress allocates a certain amount of money for a certain program, and it's written into law, and it's law, and every year there's a budget, and the budget, can the president say, "Nah, I don't like this program. I'm not gonna spend the money on that program. I'm gonna impound the money. I'm gonna either use it for something else or just not spend it. I cannot spend it."
Thank you, Ian, for the question, but that's above my pay grade. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Simple answer.
yeah. We need a somebody who's studied the law and the Constitution from that perspective. All right, here's another one. No, this is thank you, Brad, for being strong against woke. Hey, Yaron and Brad, how important are soft skills in a business professional setting? I like being direct, but some find that to be too abrasive. This is from Thomas.
Look, I mean, I would advise two things. First, speak the truth, be truthful, but also be decent. Sometimes the way I put it is, be Canadian. If you
He's Canadian, that's why, right?
So by which I mean, of course, just be polite, right? Two things. Actually, I'll add a third. So the advice I give to college students who want to go to graduate school, where they will almost certainly be facing a hostile environment, there are three things that you can do to survive and to do well. And these were the things that I lived by when I was a student. And they are first, yes, be Canadian, by which I mean just always be polite, decent, courteous.
Yep.
Secondly, always speak the truth, which I always did, even when I knew my professors disagreed with me, and sometimes even violently so. But third...
Did you ever suffer grade-wise because of that?
Maybe on the margins.
And if you thought somebody would fail you because you spoke the truth to them?
I don't think...
Because there are professors out there who will do that.
Yeah, no. So I never failed, so I never thought I would fail. But
you were in a different era. I was in a different era. I mean,
so it was on the so if I suffered at all, it was only on the margins, right?
Yeah.
It was the difference between an A and an A minus.
Okay.
But I definitely, I definitely got into it with some professors. I distinctly remember when I was in graduate school, a professor, it was a small seminar, we're sitting around a table, and I said something, and he was a large man, and he literally took his fist and he pounded the table as hard as he could.
Yeah.
He was so angry by what I said.
Yeah.
But here's the lesson of the story, and this goes to the third point. The third piece of advice I can give you is just always work harder than everybody else.
Yeah.
So if you are 1, polite, 2, you work hard, and 3, you speak the truth, you'll be fine. So that same professor who reacted literally violently in my presence to something I had once said, the last time I ever saw him before he died, I'll never forget this. I was in his car, and he was dropping me off somewhere, and he turned to me, knowing that it might be the last time I would ever see him again.
Oh.
And he said, Thompson, he said, I know I've been hard on you during your time here at Brown.
Yeah.
He said, but I want you to know it's because I respect you and because I thought you could handle it. I thought you could take it. And I'll tell you what, that meant the world to me.
Of course,
Right?
of course. That's a real compliment.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I like a number that says, Brad, thoughts on the administration? It's a $2 question. You can wing it.
Well, I think the $2 question should be your question. I'll take the $200 question.
There you go. There you go. It's not enough to get Brad to talk about the administration.
Yeah. I have opinions, but I think those opinions are best kept to myself for the moment.
Okay. Emmett says, American Mind, great book. Thank you, Dr. Thompson.
Well, thank you, Emmett.
All right. Now these questions, I think this one, if you want to, this is related to something I said yesterday, so I'll just answer this quickly. Just to correct something from yesterday, this is from Not Your Average Algorithm. The reason people sign waivers over use of their image at Ocon or other filmed private events is because it's on private property, and there is an expectation of privacy. That is not the case on a public sidewalk. You don't need anyone's consent to film in public or use their images. It's your responsibility to create your own privacy according to the Supreme Court. I get that, but I would argue the Supreme Court is wrong. And part of the problem here is that there's public space. You should treat public space from the perspective of these kind of issues, perspective of rights, as if it was private. So imagine the pavements were private. Could you then film in public, in a sense, in a setting? Would the, maybe you could if the owner of the place said, hey, if you walk on my sidewalk, don't expect privacy. Right? You would develop norms that are associated with private property. The problem is that where we have a public space. I can tell you that my sense is you can't just film me walking in a public space, use my image any way you want to, take my face and put it on somebody else's body or something like that, use it in porn, use it to have me say things I don't agree with or don't believe in. All of that seems wrong. My image is mine, and you shouldn't be able to use it. And even if you say, okay, you can use it in a public space, then you can use it in a public space as you took it. You can't then manipulate it. So there has to be guardrails here that recognize your ownership over your own image. I don't know if you have any thoughts about this.
I don't. Although that does kind of raise, what you've just said raises an interesting and maybe slightly deeper philosophic question, which I know is debated in objectivist circles. So I'll ask you, do you believe in the idea of self-ownership?
No, because I think it, although Ayn Rand uses that term.
And so does Leonard Peacock.
Yes, but if you really, I think at least I know Leonard. I think Leonard, I've also heard him say that it doesn't make sense, and I agree with it doesn't make sense part, because I think it reverses it reverses hierarchy, right? To own implies somebody owning it, so you have to have self before ownership. So self comes before ownership. So once you have a self, you own things, but you are just you. But you own your, in a sense of it's yours, your bodily fluids and your kidneys and whatever. I think you own your image, and certainly the ability, and this is the context of AI today, the ability to manipulate your image, the ability to have you say things you don't believe in, or say things that they invent, or the ability to put you in situations you wouldn't want to be in. There's something wrong with people's ability just to take your image and do whatever they want with it. So it might be true that in a public space you can film me and I don't have a say and no, but then that's all you can use. You can't then take that image of me and use it in some other in other ways. So there have to be limitations on this. Otherwise, it becomes yeah, it becomes anarchy, right? So I think the self-ownership thing is an issue of just conceptual hierarchy,
Right.
and also the way that the libertarians try to do the self-ownership, because in a sense what they say is, well, self-ownership that's self-evident. Of course you own yourself.
Right.
And then they derive everything from that.
Right.
But none of that is obvious. None of there's very little that's self-evident in life. And certainly concepts like ownership and self are not self-evident.
Correct. Right. And they're also, and as with the concept of rights, it's always in the context of a relationship, right? So it's a relationship to other people, right?
Yep.
So it seems to me that the one sense in which you could say that self-ownership is legitimate, right? It's, I mean, if it's the case that the fruits of a man's labor are his by ownership,
Yeah.
they are an extension of who and of what he has done to create it, right? And you know, I have control over what I've created, and what I have created has been created by my hands, my mind, ultimately, most importantly, my mind.
Yep.
I certainly have, I have self-governance, right? I govern myself. I control
Sure.
my mind
Sure.
and how I exercise my will.
It's just that ownership is this, and also it's something outside of you that you own, or something inside of you that you own. But it's you are you, and to own you is just just hierarchical. It also leads to these weird. Again, libertarians will argue, well, if I own myself, I can sign myself into slavery. I can,
Right.
I can. So it leads to these strange, but that's them, right?
Yeah.
I just don't think hierarchically, conceptually.
So in other words, for you, it's redundant. Would that
It's
be
definitely redundant, but it's just that the concept of self comes first. Ownership is something you do. So, to do, you already are, right? So, and you don't need it. It's not necessary. I think you're right. Your fruits of your labor are product of your effort, your need to survive, your requirements of survival. They are yours by the fact that you created them. It was your labor, your effort, your mind that went into making them. Rights are freedoms of action. Your freedom of action. They don't require ownership here. They don't require the concept of ownership yet. Mm-hmm. Ownership is, again, I think, further down.
downstream?
Downstream, yes, conceptually. But I'm not a philosopher. All right, Michael is asking, is Germany's far-right firewall crumbling? I mean, I'll just say it certainly looks like it. That is, this idea that we keep out the far right, particularly in this case the AfD, because they have a certain affiliation and association with Nazism, and we want to shut that out. That certainly seems to be crumbling. First of all, it's crumbling because they're very popular, right? They have 20% of the vote, at least according to the polls right now, and they might have more than that. We'll see what happens in the elections. But it's crumbling. I'll give you an example of it crumbling is the vote that happened, I think, yesterday or the day before in the whatever, where they voted on an new immigration law, and it couldn't pass without the AfD supporting it. And the AfD did support it, and it passed because the AfD supported it. So clearly, in order to pass certain types of legislation, they're going to need the AfD. Now, there is a move right now in Germany, convenient to all the existing political parties, to ban the AfD. That is, to take it outside of the law, which they can do. They have a majority, the non-AfD are 80%, so you could do it. But it would be horrible. What a violation of freedom of speech. Right. I'm not a fan of the AfD. I think there's a lot of really horrible stuff in there. But that's not the way you deal with it. You don't deal with it by banning it and excluding it from political participation. If Germany had a constitution, that would be barred. But of course, they don't have a constitution. And remember, Germany really started the whole hate speech movement because it was in Germany after World War II where the first violation of free speech occurred in the West, in the modern West, when, or maybe not the first violation of free speech, I'm exaggerating, but political speech at least, when Holocaust denial was viewed as a crime. You could go to jail for Holocaust denial. And that was the first, and that was the wedge. And it, of course, everything is a slippery slope. We believe in slippery slopes. Yeah. And today, if you condemn, I don't know, Muhammad or the Quran, you could get in trouble with the law in most of Europe. And it really started with the Holocaust denial. So the best thing to do with Nazism is to condemn it, to fight it, to ideologically object to it, but criminalizing ideas is always wrong.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and the AfD is now big because because Elon Musk has endorsed them. I mean, explicitly and quite strongly. And in a recent appearance where he made in front of their national convention, he told them that it was time for Germany to stop, in a sense, obsessing about their past. Which there's an element of truth to that, but there's also an element of real danger there. So, and Elon Musk is a lot of things, but the subtleties and nuances is not his strength. So I think he was wrong to say what he said. All right, Jeremy says, "Great to see you, Brad. I'm glad you were able to do a stream." Yeah, me too. This was fun.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Well, anything else you want to talk about? We've got a few minutes.
You asking your audience or me?
I'm asking you, and I'm asking them if they
Yeah.
want to ask any questions. They've got a couple of minutes to ask.
Yeah.
Them. They need to be quick about it.
Well, I don't know why we're not doing this show in Puerto Rico.
Well, I've invited you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I invited you, but you never seem to find the time
I
to
see.
come.
It's my fault, right?
Absolutely, it's your fault, and I can see why. I visited Brad's new home today, and I think if he still lived in the old house, he would be coming to Puerto Rico quite often. But now that he lives in this beautiful house with a beautiful view on the kind of on a golf course, it's really pretty there. And now it's like this is the ugly season because everything is gray and there are no leaves on the trees. I can just imagine what it's like in the spring where everything is green and
it is beautiful.
It must be beautiful. So yes, the incentive to come to Puerto Rico has clearly gone down since you moved to the new house.
It has, but I'm available between December and January. When
January, December, January is
usually
a very good time to. Usually a very good time to come to Puerto Rico. All right, so Kirk asks, this is a topic that Brad loves to talk about, I know. Would Brad say that he defeated the BAP dorks?
Well, great question, Kirk. Thank you. If it's the Kirk I think I know. I can't say that I've defeated.
They're still there.
The Baptists.
Sadly,
they're still there. I'm assuming his Twitter account and his podcast are growing. His books are still selling. I mean, his Bronze Age Mindset has been now out 8 years or so, 7-8 years, and it's.
Well, look at what just happened. Curtis Yarvin, who's not exactly BAP, but similar
in that world,
just did this big New York Times interview.
Yeah, absolutely.
So he's gaining in prominence.
No, and look, I mean, I wrote my BAP essays because I saw the influence that he was having on particularly young men between the ages of 18 and 35, and I thought it was a pernicious influence, and so I wrote my essays in 2020, 2021, and I mean, it is sort of interesting. I mean, I guess I've won to the extent that BAP seems to have an obsession with me now and talks about me on a semi-regular basis on his podcast and is still tweeting about me. So, I mean, he clearly views me as some kind of threat, I think, to his ideas. But it is, I think, also the case that I think the more fundamental point is that for objectivists and I think for everybody is that there is there's a generation of lost young men, and we need to find a way to appeal to them, to to help them find meaning in their lives. And I have always thought and continue to think that objectivism can and should be the philosophy which gives them that kind of meaning, because the BAP philosophy is in many ways, I mean, not only is it pernicious, it's just stupid.
It's stupid. It's
know?
not. And in that sense, we've talked about this many times. The more dangerous trend out there with young men is their attraction to, Catholicism / the integration, integralists, the Deneen's and Vermeules, and kind of that part of the religious right, or new religious right, that's much more philosophical and dangerous. Also, at the end of the day, ideas are pretty stupid, but they're much more anchored.
They are, and they're advocating. I mean, Curtis Yarvin, you mentioned.
Yeah.
He's a monarchist.
Yeah, I know.
Right? He thinks that the American Revolution was a mistake and that the wrong side won.
Yeah.
Right? And then the Catholic integralists, they want world popedom.
Yep.
They want a world governed politically from the Vatican.
And they take this seriously. I mean, it sounds absurd and ridiculous, like the Muslim Sharia law, global domination. But they really believe this stuff, and they really think that America, because of its values, is an abomination.
They do, and they also hold positions of genuine, not only political power, but academic power.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's an integralist. One of the leading integralist thinkers, Adrian Vermeule, is at Harvard Law School. Deneen is at Notre Dame.
And a huge influence on J.D. Vance, Deneen.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I agree entirely. The Catholic integralists are a much, much greater threat to the future of freedom in this country.
And this is the thing, I go back to the point you made earlier. God, we should be able to crush them. Right?
Well, of
we
course.
should be able to intellectually defeat these guys, and objectivism should be so much more attractive to young people than ancient Catholic. I mean, young people are supposed to be radicals and want to be different,
And passionate about ideas. But yeah. I will say this. Gen Z really is searching for meaning in their lives.
Yeah.
And first Jordan Peterson was able to fill that void. He gave them he helped them to regain meaning in their lives. But what's interesting is that Jordan Peterson, I believe it was August of 2019, when he kind of fell off the earth and disappeared for a year and a half because of health reasons. That same month, the Claremont Review of Books did a somewhat positive review of BAP's Bronze Age mindset. And all of a sudden, as I say, the youth vote switched. And all of a sudden, Peterson was gone and BAP was attracting the attention of young men. And one of the things that he does quite successfully is, I think part of his goal is to give young men a sense of meaning. And most interestingly, he focuses on aesthetics, on beauty. He says we live in a world of ugliness, and there's a sense in which, of course, that is entirely true.
But his conceptions of aesthetics is shallow and superficial, right?
To say the least of what it is. But even that fact alone tells you, right, that there is a hunger and a need for a kind of a new aesthetic, a new sense of beauty, and a new understanding of meaning. So I guess what I'll end this my answer to this question on is objectivists, I think, need to do a better job of understanding their audience. And let's just say the audience is young people between the ages of 18 and 35. And we need to better understand where they're coming from, what their needs are. Because Ayn Rand, Ayn Rand has answers, solutions to the problems of meaning that they're experiencing.
Absolutely.
Right? It may not be, for instance, in Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. Maybe it's in
The Fountainhead.
In the Fountainhead for sure. and Ayn Rand's The Romantic Manifesto.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other sense is I completely agree. We live in a desert aesthetically. I mean, imagine what this, we're looking out the window on the campus. Imagine what this would look like if it was ancient Greece, right? This would be covered with sculpture. There wouldn't be just, I mean, there would be a real aesthetic to it. And this is pretty, it's pretty, but it's kind of bland. And particularly this building was sitting in this mishmash of architecturally, I don't know who designed it exactly, but there's this, it's neither here nor there. But there's a real thirst for beauty that is not fulfilled in our modern world. And again, Ayn Rand has answers to that. Romantic Manifesto is clearly has answers for that.
That's right.
Right, Cook, thank you, Cook. Cook wants to point out that the one great book that you wrote that you didn't mention is the one that I was a small part of, and that's Neoconservatism, an Obituary for an Idea.
A book which I will mention, I do not see when you're back in Puerto Rico broadcasting, I do not see on your bookshelf.
It's on the bookshelf.
Oh,
it's definitely on the bookshelf, no question about that. And it's a book that I use often to link to Amazon because I'm accused almost on a weekly basis of being a neoconservative. Yeah. So I like to link to the book. I don't know if any of those people actually buy it, but all right. Last two questions. Carl says, how does Brad handle students coming in who are religious, philosophically speaking, faith and epistemology, altruism and ethics, magical worldview, and metaphysics?
Good question, great question, tough question to answer as I'm sitting here on campus, surrounded by my students,
yeah.
right? And the fact of the matter is, my students, let's say the students in the Lyceum program are 90% plus religious conservatives. And they are also really, really smart, and they are also wonderful people. Mm-hmm. So it's I don't have the luxury of sitting behind a paywall on a private blog denouncing lots of things. I live in this world and am surrounded every day by wonderful people who maybe have different values than I do. And my job is not to publicly denounce them. My job is not to attack them. My job is not to mock them. My job is to make them serious young men and women who take ideas seriously, who take their own moral character seriously. And, if I can introduce them to if I can broaden their perspective, then I think I've succeeded. The other thing, in addition to being Canadian, just sort of moral decency goes a long way, right? Mm-hmm. In helping to bring people who might not share your own views around to at least being open to your views, right? If you model your own moral philosophy, and people who have a very different moral philosophy, different religion, if they see you and they can admire you and respect you, knowing that you do not share their deepest, let's say, theological commitments, at the very least, it diffuses their immediate, what would otherwise potentially be an immediate hostility. Yep. And if I can do that much, then I think I will have succeeded.
All right, Justin, this one could be a 3-hour or a whole book. So quick answer. Was America's founding a Christian founding?
No.
Yeah. Yeah, read the book.
Read the book. Actually, read both books.
Yeah, because you can hear it from a horse's mouth, so to say. Right?
Yeah, no, exactly. The answer is no. But that's not to say that 99% of all of America's founding fathers weren't Christian. Of course they were Christian. They were all Christian. They took their Christianity very, very seriously. But was it founded as a Christian nation? The answer is no. And one way you can answer or look at the question is to ask what the Puritans would have thought of what was founded in 1776 and 1787. The Puritans would not have they would have considered it a moral and theological abomination.
Yep. Okay, Justin also asks, do Bible stories implicitly support capitalism? No. Not implicitly or explicitly.
Look, I know a lot of Christian pro-capitalists
Yeah, of course.
who tell me all the time that the Bible supports capitalism, and I'm sorry I don't remember the exact passages, but they can rattle off at least half a dozen parables and stories in the Bible that they think support capitalism. And sure, maybe there are some which would seem to support capitalism. Well, of course, a term which was not even understood. The very idea of laissez-faire capitalism was not understood.
No conception of rights or anything. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. But I think what's most important is that you have to look at the overall philosophy, particularly the philosophy, the teachings of Christ, which I'll be writing about on the Substack. I mentioned this series of essays I'll be doing on self-interest. It's really self-interest and altruism, and the most important of the essays will be on the Christian view of self-interest and altruism, and I kind of lay out the Apostles' Creed, which I think is profoundly anti-capitalist.
Yeah, and I think the Sermon on the Mount is profoundly anti-capitalist. And look, I mean, my view is the Bible, like many books like it, was written in a way that you can find pretty much anything you want in it. That is, it's got an agenda. Certainly the New Testament, I think, has an agenda. But it also has enough so that it can satisfy lots of different perspectives and lots of different people. When we studied the Old Testament in school, we'd study a sentence, and then we'd study the 50 different interpretations of 50 different rabbis of that statement. And each one of them interpreted it completely differently. And if you come at it already a convinced capitalist, then you'll find capitalism there, but it requires you to evade certain parts of it that are inconsistent. All right, they keep coming with questions. All right, Paul says, I thought the founders were mostly deists.
Yeah, I mean, some of them were clearly deists. Jefferson, deist. John Adams, pretty close to being a deist. Madison, Washington.
Yeah.
I mean, Hamilton. I mean, they were sort of all in that world. None of them were 5-point Calvinists, although some founding fathers were 5-point Calvinists, right?
Okay.
So second, third tier founding fathers were Calvinists. And, I don't think there were any founding fathers who said that they were not Christian, or certainly not anti-Christian. Most of them, to one degree or another, said that they were Christians to one degree or another. But what's important though is what they created publicly.
Yes.
Right? And what they created publicly was a constitution which created a government, and that constitution is grounded in certain moral principles. And what are those moral principles? Are those moral principles explicitly defined as the laws of God? No. The principles are defined as the laws of nature, right? So if you read, again, it's all in here, if you read the revolutionary pamphlet literature, you can't help but be struck by how Enlightenment these revolutionaries were, how pro-Enlightenment they were, and students of John Locke, and who grounded their moral theory on what they called the moral laws and rights of nature. And now maybe they thought the ultimate source, was God, or as Jefferson put it in the Declaration, nature's God. But even the idea of nature's God, right, is very different than the Puritans' God of the Old Testament.
God in the Declaration, right? He used creator.
Well, creator's used, but in the first sentence of the Declaration, he talks about the laws of nature and of nature's God. Right. So it's not just God; it's nature's God.
Yep.
Which is an enlightenment. It's an
enlightenment concept.
It's a kind of a Newtonian God. That is a God who created the universe and then stepped back and let it run on its own.
Yep. All right. Robert says, "Thank you for the reasonable, insightful discussion, gentlemen. Very much appreciated." And what do you think of the new administration? He's kidding. Justin says, "Okay, this will be the final question. Dr. T, I don't know if anybody calls you Dr. T. Dr. T, is there still any Canadian left in you?
That's a great question. I left Canada in 1979 to escape Pierre Trudeau's socialism.
79.
And I have, other than going back to visit my family, I've been out of Canada since then. So, you know, for many, many decades. And as I've written about before, in different contexts, from the time I was a 7 or 8 year old boy, born in Canada, I knew that I was born in the wrong country, identified with America from the time I was a child. So even when I was living in Canada as a Canadian, I didn't identify as Canadian. Now, that said, you know, you can take the boy out of Canada, but you know, there are some elements that you can't take out of the boy, some Canadian elements in me. Apparently, there's one word that gives me away as Canadian. It's the about word, and which I don't hear myself, but there you go. And you know, I guess the other thing is I still put a high value on manners and politeness and just being a decent bloke.
There you go. So, I mean, by that interpretation, being an American is about the ideas that you hold and your sense of life and your character, not about
100%.
where your parents were born.
Yeah.
It's a big debate going on right now, of course. All right, this is a quick one. My son is a senior in high school looking at colleges. Is it super difficult to get into your program? And how can we find out more about admissions? I thought you'd want to answer that one.
Yeah, so I mean, you have to do two things. Your son would have to apply first to Clemson University. To be honest, if he's a senior in high school right now, it's too late. It's too late to apply to Clemson, and it's too late.
It's already January. Yeah, sorry, February.
It's too late to apply to the Clemson to the Lyceum program. So I'm very sorry.
That's fine.
That.
Tell him to take a year off. It's good for him anyway. Most Americans need a year off before they go to college anyway because they don't know anything about anything. And then he can apply next year.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So where can they find out information about admissions? It's all on the website?
Well, admissions to Clemson or to the Lyceum?
To Lyceum.
Yeah, it's all on our website at the Snow Institute for the Study of Capitalism, and just go to the Lyceum tab, and it's all there. The application process is all there, and you know, our curriculum, just about everything you want to know is on the website.
Well, it's been a pleasure, as always.
Yeah.
It's good to be in Clemson, back at Clemson, even if it's just for one day. And I will see you guys. I actually don't know when I'll see you because I'm traveling. So when I have an opportunity, I'll turn the live stream on and we'll do a show. But have a great rest of your week and a weekend. And Brad, thank you. And we'll see you.
Great.
See you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.